Hi, class. All right, coming to you again from my house. I'm still in quarantine. I hope that you have not found yourself in quarantine and that you are safe and healthy. Normally this week, leading up to test 2, we would be meeting to review chapters 4, 7, and 4, 5, and 7. But since we couldn't meet, I promised I would post a quick review of the items that you need to study and be prepared to be tested on for test number 2. So I'll go quickly through those, refer back to your lecture outlines. That's going to be the biggest help for the test. Don't forget, it will become available on Thursday, this coming Thursday, the 1st, and it will close on Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 6th. So you must take it on Blackboard during that time. Okay, in chapter 4, when we talked about torts, we highlighted a couple of the different damages that somebody might file suit and try to collect. Compensatory and the 2 different categories of special and general, and then punitive. So you need to know those types of damages. Compensatory, meaning to compensate, reimburse, and then there's the special and the general. Medical bills, those kinds of things that have a definitive amount, those are going to be your special. General, they're going to be seeking to reimburse somebody, but it's not really something you can present a bill for. It's pain and suffering, something we've got to try to put a number on. Then punitive damages, remember the sole intent of those is to punish somebody for their behavior and to deter them from doing that again in the future. When we talked about different types of intentional torts, remember we've got intentional torts and we've got unintentional, which is our negligence. When we talked about intentional torts, we talked a little bit at length about false imprisonment. You need to know about that. And then you really need to know a lot about defamation. Remember a couple of the main things to remember for defamation. A third party has to hear it. If I call you a mean name and tell lies about you only to your face, that's not defamation. Somebody else has to hear it for it to be defamatory. And remember, it's only defamatory if it's false. If it's true, that is a complete defense to anybody claiming that you have defamed them. The other one you need to know is number 6 in your lecture outline. Familiarize yourself with fraudulent misrepresentation, making misrepresentations to somebody knowingly with the intent to deceive them and them relying on it. Study up on those 3 different types of intentional torts. Negligence. So that's the opposite of intentional torts. That means you're still liable for something because you didn't do something. And remember, when in doubt on negligence, the standard is what would a reasonable person have done in those circumstances? What would a reasonable person have done? And remember, too, you need to know the 4 elements of negligence. Somebody had to have a duty. They had to have breached that duty. It caused you damages, okay? So you've got those 4 elements have to be present before somebody is going to be liable for negligence. Keep in mind, too, the bottom of page 2 there on your torts, the duty of landowners and the duty of professionals. When I talk about the duty of landowners, you have to warn against hidden dangers. Remember, that's why when you walk into Walmart, there's going to be yellow cones over a wet area that they've just mopped, because that's going to be a hidden danger. I can't see that whenever I'm walking. Some dangers, though, are so obvious that you don't have to warn against them, but you have to warn against the hidden ones. Then keep in mind, when we talk about negligence and talking about professional negligence, so attorneys, doctors, whoever, engineers, when we talk about what was the reasonable person going to do in those circumstances, I'm not talking about what would a reasonable person walking down the street have done. If we're talking about medical negligence, what would a doctor with that similar training in those similar circumstances have done? So I'm comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. What would a reasonable lawyer have done? What would a reasonable doctor have done? A reasonable engineer. So we're comparing you to your peers, not just to some phantom reasonable person out there. Okay, defenses to negligence. Remember we talked about in the state of Kentucky and in most other states. Number 4 there, comparative negligence. So basically this means I'm going to compare the plaintiff's fault with the defendant's fault to reduce how much money that plaintiff's going to be able to get from that defendant. So basically, say say they find the defendant at fault. Stella sues McDonald's and she gets $100,000 from McDonald's. But the jury also finds that she was 30% at fault for putting that coffee in between her legs. Her damages are going to be reduced by 30%. So she's only going to get $70,000 from McDonald's and not the full $100,000. So we're comparing the negligence of the parties to figure out how much money that plaintiff should actually get. Strict liability, don't forget, that is liability regardless of fault. We don't care if you were at fault. There are some situations that are just so dangerous and so like explosives and dangerous animals. They're so inherently dangerous in nature that regardless of how many risks or how many precautions you took, if something goes wrong, you're liable. We don't care. And then lastly, product liability. Don't forget that the same kinds of claims can be made for product liability when we talk about negligence. When we talk about negligence, we can apply that to product liability. So first off, you can make a claim because they designed it negligently, or maybe they put the parts all together negligently, meaning they didn't intentionally do anything, but they failed to exercise reasonable care. So they were negligent in some component of creating that product and you suffered a harm. That's a claim that you can make under products liability. Also, fraudulent misrepresentation. The manufacturer, the designer, whoever misrepresented something about that product that wasn't true and you relied on it and you were harmed by it. So there's kind of two different angles you can take when you're suing based on harm caused by a product. All right, so I know I'm going quick, but just want you've already got your lecture outlines, just want you to kind of highlight what it is you need to focus on, study more in your textbook. Chapter 5, couple of things to remember when we talked about intellectual property. Remember, we're talking about things, some property rights that result from intellectual, creative processes that you've got. And we broke it up into trademark, patent, and copyright. So remember, for trademark, we're talking about words, symbols, sounds, designs. And in addition, number 1 there, remember we also talked about catchy phrases and shapes being included as well. You need to know that. And just think about it. Just do it. The Nike phrase that we all know and recognize. So just remember, catchy phrases are included in trademarks as well. And remember that they can be registered with the state or the federal government. That's number 3 there under trademarks. There's different types of protection and different grants of protection that you might get depending on how global you're trying to go with your trademark. Remember the symbol for it as well. You've got the little R, and honestly, I don't even know if you need to know that for your test. It used to be some bonus points I would give you if you were able to draw that. But since you're taking it through, Blackboard, you're probably not going to get those anymore. But it's still important to know. And remember, trademark infringement, you can do that intentionally or unintentionally. Oops, I've been using your phrase. Well, sorry, it's still my phrase. You're still infringing on it. You're still liable for it. So remember, whether you meant to or you didn't, you can be infringing on somebody's trademark. Okay, patent. Don't forget, patent is an invention. All right, something you've invented and you want to get a patent for it so nobody else goes and claims it. Number 1 under there, remember, you don't just get a patent for anything. It has to be new, useful, and not obvious. So they're not just going to patent anything. It's got to be something that's useful before they're going to grant it that patent protection. And then number 3, copyrights. And again, normally you would have gotten bonus points for drawing the symbol of the little C with the circle around it. But you know what your bonus points are? Getting to use your notes on your test. So there you go. So don't forget, with a copyright, what we're talking about is what's protected. So we're talking about books, records, films, artworks, architectural plans, menus, something that's fixed into a durable medium that can be copied. All right, books, that's fixed into a medium that can be copied. Therefore, it's copyrightable. All right, you can get that protection. And don't forget the first sale doctrine. This is what protects the yard sale goers. So the owner of a particular item that's copyrighted can then sell it without the authority of whoever owns the copyright, basically after it's first sold. So, you know, when it's sitting on the shelves at the music store, obviously the owner the owner of the copyright has some protections. But then once it's sold to that consumer and then they want to get rid of it, under the first sale doctrine, they're going to be protected for not violating any copyright laws when they sell it to another person. Now, if you go out and copy it a million times and make money off of it, that's a whole different ballgame. But you get the point. Okay, and then last but not least, Chapter 7, where we talked about criminal law. I'll touch base on some of it. Don't forget, with a crime, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Can the Commonwealth of Kentucky prove your guilt, you as the defendant, beyond a reasonable doubt? Classifying crimes, middle of page 1, you need to know the difference in felony and misdemeanor. Felony is obviously your more serious crimes, and then misdemeanors are more of your small offenses that are punishable by a fine or up to a year in prison, not quite as serious as a felony. Don't forget, the criminal act. To be criminally liable, you have to have done the act, but you also have to have had the intent to commit that crime. The mental part of it and the action part of it both have to exist at the same time for you to be criminally liable. Couple of property crimes for you to remember: larceny and forgery. Study up on those. Larceny and forgery. Larceny, you're taking and carrying away something, their personal property, with the intent to keep it, the intent to deceive it from them, so there's no mistake. You didn't accidentally think it was yours. You intended to take it. Forgery, you are fraudulently making or altering a writing that changes somebody's obligations. You're signing their name on a check. You're signing their name on a document. Forgery. All right, white-collar crimes. Remember, these are nonviolent, so nobody's getting a gun held to their head. Instead, they are crimes where somebody's trying to get an advantage, personal, business, whatever. Main one you need to know about is embezzlement, where you're fraudulently taking people's money, you're misappropriating it. So again, you're not using any force. It's not like robbery, but it's still a crime, embezzlement. Defenses to criminal liability. Remember when we talked about these defenses, these are basically saying, okay, the crime happened, but why did it happen? Is there an explanation for why it happened that would relieve you of your liability? The two you need to know, self-defense and duress. Take a look at those. Self-defense, you did something that was reasonably necessary to protect yourself or another person. And then duress, a gun was held to your head whenever you forged somebody's signature on that. So you did it, but there's a reason why you did it, and that's because you were being unlawfully pressured into doing it. All right, important